next day, we left the city for a 2-hour drive back to visit family in Covan, for it would be Christmas Eve. In Guatemala, traditionally, they celebrate Christmas on the 24th and call it Noche Buena, Spanish for the good night. They always wait up all night until it's the 25th, and then set off fireworks and cook food and open gifts.
Ahí está Karen, te hice un saludo.
Hola, feliz Navidad
para que tengamos un 2000.
Bueno, qué bueno saludarlos, estamos...
Te estás perdiendo.
Sí. Para todos y...
Un saludo.
Un saludo de feliz Navidad para todos.
Hola.
¡Feliz Navidad!
In Guatemala during Christmas, everything shuts down. So we took advantage of the opportunity to visit families in need that were affected by the hurricanes. We visited one lady in Covan who takes care of her ailing mother and 2 sons. Her house that she was renting was destroyed by the hurricane floods. She had to be rescued and pulled out to safety and lost all her belongings. Most people in Covan were caught by surprise because they didn't believe it could get that bad. So now she rents another apartment and has a few things that were loaned to her from friends, including a kitchen set and stove. The local Nazarene church donated beds for all 4. When we arrived, she had no food until we had come up with the care basket of 2 weeks of groceries. She testified that every day God has provided for her to eat. She works, but it's not enough to take care of her mom and sons. Rent is very high, and her mother's illness drains her physically and financially. It was definitely a divine appointment that we came because one of our relatives informed us of her situation. Since it was Christmas and all the markets were closed, we went to another city called Carchao to purchase food. While we were there, we also visited and purchased food for my wife's great aunt in Carchao, whose house was literally 15 feet away from being buried in the flood. Afterwards, we returned to the city of Covan.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei mesonot.
It just so happened that Christmas fell on the Sabbath. So we returned to a house that we were renting to celebrate the Sabbath with pizza and traditional Guatemala folk songs and hymns. The next day, Sunday, we visited a pastor friend of my wife by the name of Eleazar, who was operating his congregation in his garage. We had been sending him monetary help to get his stuff recovered out of his flooded church, All that was left was a cross sticking out of the mud.
Yo lo hago solo para ti. Voy a perder la compostura.
We got to minister, and I gave a short concert. Then I felt God telling me to prophesy over the pastor, that the people who were present with him, though they are few, God had to prune the ones not assigned to walk with him. I said to him that the ones who stayed are the ones that came prepared for that word. The pastor was amazed how I knew his situation and got emotional over my word of knowledge, because this was the third time he would be rebuilding his church. First it was his father who had a falling out. The second time was the flood, so now he is presently keeping his church in the garage until he can find a place.
When my wife and I, wherever we go,
Cuando mi esposa y yo, donde quiera que vamos,
if it's a restaurant
si es un restaurante
or a store,
o tienda,
no matter where we go,
no importa dónde vamos,
it seems like all of a sudden it gets busy.
pareciera que de repente se puso bien congregado, como que llegó mucha gente.
I can't really explain it,
No te explico, no puedo explicarlo,
but it just seems like it always happens that
pero
way.
parece que siempre pasa así.
So we beat the rush, if you know what I'm saying.
Pareciera que nosotros llegamos antes que llegara todo el mundo.
And so I'm saying that after we leave here today,
Y te estoy diciendo que cuando salgamos de acá,
you're going to run out of room.
te vas a sacar
And I see you already are.
sin lugar. Y yo veo que ya estás quedándote sin lugar para ocupar gente. O
You're
sea,
going to get to some new people that has never heard of this place.
y vas a tener muchas otras personas que no han oído de
And
este
they're not
lugar.
going to know why they're here.
Y ellos ni siquiera van a saber por qué están
But
aquí.
you know why,
Pero tú sabes,
because the Lord opened the door.
porque Dios abrió la puerta.
We broke down some walls today,
Nosotros rompimos paredes hoy,
spiritual walls.
espirituales.
And so I want you all to be cheerful and
Quiero,
joyful,
quiero que estén contentos y regocijados,
because he who began a good work in you
porque aquel que empezó un buen trabajo en ti
is going to cause it to mature until the day of the Messiah.
After dropping off Tia Chiki and the two nieces and the nephew, and picking up Mama Ellie, we would go back for another 2-hour drive to the city of Guatemala. But this trip back would be different because my wife got a revelation while listening to the flight attendant on her second flight say that you must put on your face mask first in case of loss of altitude and then help the other person. So my wife felt it was God's way of saying that before she could help the people, she needed to help herself. That is, Sandra, of course. See, you know, ministers sometimes get tired and they forget about themselves and take care of everybody else's needs. Sure enough, she was struggling with a terminally ill mother and a lot of controversy with other churches because they keep the Sabbath. And also the fact that she was taking care of other people with disabilities. Many Christians in Guatemala regard people with disabilities such as autism, cerebral palsy, are demon-possessed, and that it was caused by the sin of the parents. So they don't look at Regatta Green with a very good eye. So that night we went back and had dinner with Sandra and Nicodemus and family. We got to talking about stars, since it was the time that many people were paying attention to what was happening in the heavens. Then we stayed at a nice hotel for the night to get some much-needed rest. The next morning we took Sandra and her 2 kids while her husband stayed behind to work, and drove about 4 hours to the eastern shores of Guatemala, where there is a resort place called Rio Dulce in the state of Isabel. It was one of the toughest drives we would take in the entire 3 weeks, because half of the 4 hours was narrow dirt roads with ruts so bad in some places due to a lot of rain and neglect of maintenance. In Guatemala they have these speed bumps everywhere called túmulos. But these roads were túmulos 24/7. Several times young kids were taking advantage of people by blocking the road with a rope or a string so that they can just request a toll. Rio Dulce is Spanish for Sweet River because it is where the river and the Pacific Ocean converge into the lake called Lago Isabel, Spanish for Lake of Isabel. It was there that we took a boat ride to a cabin on one of the islands.
Señoras y señores, les presento el Castillo de San Felipe. Sí. ¿Cómo les va? Hi, John. Buenos días. Aquí con mi cafecito. Sí, porque llovió. Y cosa más preciosa y linda. ¡De la cintura, Lele!
The next morning, we rented a jet ski for the kids and then visited right across the lake from what's called San Felipe Castle, which technically is an ancient military fort with its original cannons. Then it was 4 hours back to La Tinta, and we wasted no time the next morning getting back to the market to buy a bunch of food for the grandparents' shelter and Sandra's home. Many in the town were suddenly in this panic that a second wave of COVID was on the way, so it was wisdom in case the city shut down to stock up. Can you tell me, what is your favorite Bible verse?
¿Cuál es su favorito verso de la Biblia?
When we went back to the shelter for the grandparents, it was there that I got to dialogue with one of the residents, a former pastor in his 90s who was abandoned by his church organization.
I enjoy reading it.
Amen. What can you think of a verse? Once he got started talking, he was, as the saying goes in America, putting on the preach. Now, because we are a legal foundation in Guatemala, we were given the power of attorney.
Now I go through the new covenant, and it's amazing to read it. Because everything was inspired by God, and He's blessed those who are the ones that are reading them.
Mm-hmm. So when the church gave us his papers and we went to get his stuff at his church, it was very apparent that they didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore. Well, he's putting on the preach now. In our previous visit, Tia Chiki hit it off talking with this pastor also because she recognized the elders' names of the church he belonged to. He brightened up when he told all his stories and what he stands for. If you don't understand that verse, you don't understand the whole Bible.
Otra parte del pasaje, como le digo, el capítulo 19
el capítulo 20 de Éxodo
Exodus 19:20
nos habla cuando Dios habló en el monte Sinaí con la casa de Israel.
spoke on Sinai to the children of Israel.
Sí, el capítulo 20 y 19.
2019.
Wow.
Ocho niñas, 9 niños.
My daughter's birthday was coming up, so she had this idea to bless children with candy and toys and bring the party to them. So after the grandparents' shelter, we visited this community again called the Minimum Roof Project. In Spanish, it's called Techo Minima, literally at least a roof. Then we went to see a large family of 16 children that helped Sandra at her husband's church. As soon as they heard candy and toys, all these kids came running out. Some of them were running out without any clothes on, some putting their clothes on as they were running. We would then visit 3 more families that we have been supporting. One was a single father with 4 children.
Coming in.
One child was a 19-year-old girl in a wheelchair with cerebral palsy.
Es grande a la casa. Ay.
Pero su cuerpo no de función. Y hermana Juanita dejó a ella la más chiquita que dejó, ¿verdad? Entonces, la hermana Juanita, el mismo día que recibe a Cristo, se trabaja y lucha por.
To make matters worse, his wife had recently passed away from an illness, and now he makes tortillas and sells them in town, but it's hard because he can't leave his daughter.
I want you to know that this child has a pure heart.
Quiero que sepas que esta niña tiene un corazón puro.
God uses pure hearts.
Y Dios usa los corazones puros.
The Bible says that blessed are the pure in heart, for
La
they
Bi-
shall see God.
Dice, bendecidos sean los de corazón puro porque ellos verán a Dios.
He uses children like this as
Él
an
usa
example
niños así como un ejemplo
of his character.
de su carácter.
When people get uncomfortable,
Cuando las personas se sienten incómodos,
that's because they sense the Spirit of God.
porque ellos
Purity.
sienten la puridad de Dios y les intimida.
And sin cannot stand in the presence
El
of God.
pecado no puede pararse delante de la presencia de Dios.
They can't handle the problem in their own hearts.
Ellos no pueden controlar el pecado en su propio corazón.
We tend to be offended that people would look at us weird,
Nos ofendemos cuando la gente nos mira raro,
but God is trying to expose their
pero
weirdness.
Dios es el que expone lo que está en ellos.
So she is going to be an example of a pure heart.
Ella es un ejemplo de un corazón puro.
You watch. She's going
Tú
to see
ves,
God.
ella va a ver a Dios, ella va a ver a Dios.
One time he left his daughter to do an errand, and his daughter was gone when he returned. After a long search, they found her in a ditch without the wheelchair, and thieves had stolen what little he had from his home.
Precious little child, and she had a
Cleft palate.
The second home we visited was a single mother of 2. The infant had a cleft palate. Through our donations, we paid for transportation and a place to stay, while another organization paid for the surgery.
Pretty much the money to take a trip to Antigua, Guatemala to make the surgery, and also to pay for all the utensils and whatever cost the surgery will be. And so we helped, Brigada Gree helped, and they did all the surgeries needed for her until she's grown a little bit more. But then you're going to do another one to completely seal it. But as for right now, she's considered better. And this is one of the cases that Brigada Green has helped.
Awesome.
Igual el techo mínimo y el ecofiltro, pues eso es lo que se les va apoyando a las familias.
Another thing is that we provided this roof. It's called
Corrugated steel.
Yeah, it's called, the program, it's called Minimum Roof, which means that we do roof for everybody so the water doesn't come in. And also we got a donation for the foundation of these called eco filters. This is how they filter their water because of the pandemia thing. There was no water to drink, so this is how they purify their water. And it was donated to our foundation, and we spread it around.
Our last place in La Tinta was to visit a young man who had been paralyzed from the waist down after falling from a tree. We had to climb up another mountain to go see him. He specifically requested that we come visit him so that he can thank us for supporting him. He lives in a very dimly lit house, and in front of his bed is a table full of cell phone parts. This is how he provides for his family, by fixing cell phones. He had been immobile for so long that now his legs are dead and have become charcoal black. So we gave him monetary help and one of the last 2 bags of food that we had given away that was still left over. He truly was a great example to those who don't give up but continue to take care of his family. That same day, we drove 4 hours back to Guatemala City and watched the fireworks to bring in the new year. The next day, we drove 5.5 hours to drive to the city called Huehuetenango. The road was full of winding, narrow one-lane roads each way, with slow trucks, crazy drivers, deep ruts, and of course, those dreaded dominoes.
Do it again, Dad.
Nope, I'm tired. My wife has a cousin named Leo who's a lawyer in Huehuetenango. For quite some time, my wife had noticed that her cousin was posting on Facebook that he was keeping the Shabbat. Now, she didn't talk to him or I prior to this trip, but she felt led that we should make sure that we do the Shabbat with him. But to our surprise, this would become the biggest highlight of our trip, because we found out that Leo was so on fire about keeping Shabbat, he wanted us to meet his pastor, who was a Messianic believer, and it just so happened that it was the only Messianic synagogue in the entire city.
Your destination is on the right.
Oh, licenciado en el básquet.
We drove up to the steep mountain where the congregation meets. At the west end of the parking lot, you can see the entire city skyline below what is called Mountain of Prayer. We learned that the ambassador to Israel had visited there because we heard that there was a place called the Mountain of Prayer. In Israel, there is one also. So he visited and planted 3 flagpoles, one for Guatemala, one for the city, and one for Israel. By the time we got to the building, we met Pastor Carlos, who was so excited that we wanted to actually visit his place that he had us do the entire Shabbat service, minister, and do a concert. Then the next morning, he also asked us to do the Torah service for Shabbat, complete with another concert. Later that evening, Pastor Carlos asked me to lead the Havdalah service to end the Sabbath at a ranch owned by one of the members named Manrique. Manrique is a wealthy businessman that produces and exports coffee to America. We had such an impact on these people that they're now actually considering having a stadium filled up for a crusade late 2021, featuring me doing a performance there. The congregation was so excited to have us that we would just mention anything, and they would erupt like there was no manana. We'd say, Shabbat Shalom, and they'd just go crazy like we just introduced the Shabbat. The next day we returned to Guatemala, where we stayed with my sister-in-law Karen. She's a single mom who works from the home and has a ministry for women but has no furniture. So we bought her a living room set, a coffee maker, and a toaster oven so that she can minister to the women that are present. We also purchased a wheelchair that would be sent to Brigada Green in La Tinta for the ministry of the grandparents. We also purchased a guitar for my father-in-law to keep him occupied in his later years. The next morning was Ellie's birthday. We left to celebrate at a beach. It was a 3-hour drive to the black sand beach to have our last dinner before heading back to the big city to repack in 2 days. We have reached the end of our journey, and how perfect we have a sunset to end it all. 3 weeks of mission trip, and we have covered every corner of Guatemala, roughly the size of Colorado, but it takes sometimes over a day just to get from one place to another. We started out, we landed in Guatemala with our feet on the ground. We went to La Tinta, which is in the north side, and then and we helped the people there that lost a lot of their farmland to hurricanes Iota and Eta. And then we went to Kovan, where we helped a pastor restore his congregation there, and a family lost everything. And so that was the north side. Then we went all the way to the east, where it was called Estaban. And so we spent a day there. And then we went back to Guatemala, and we went all the way to the west side, which is Huehuetenango. And there I had several concerts where we got to keep the Shabbat with the only Hebrew congregation house that is in Huehuetenango City. And it just so happened that part of our family goes there, and so what are the chances? That was an amazing time. And then we came all the way back to Guatemala City, spent the night there, and today we come out to the south side of Guatemala. So we've covered it all. So here we are in a place called Montadico. So this is the black volcanic sands beach of Montenegro. We've got the shores and a perfect sunset to end it all. Look at that, isn't that gorgeous? So we got to see the planets align. We got to see the solar eclipse that was in Argentina and Chile. And we also got to see Jupiter and Saturn. We even got to see a volcano erupt. So we got to see a lot of things. Thank you so much for joining us on our trip.
No eras tú la reina, es su mamá. Con su amigo. Say something, it's a video.
I'm not going to practice social distancing. I'm participating. We're not close.
You weird, Dad. Okay. Aquí vamos. You got it. Es astronauta, yo creo que a la luna en vez de Guatemala. You don't look like you're going to Guatemala, you look like you're going to the moon.
Yeah. And I got my Jedi robe too with me, so the force will be with me.
Una polla bien bonita. Mírala, mírala, la dejó tonta.
Tiene algo la gallina.
No, pues la tontó porque la dejó por un lado. He's all buried. Karen.
Goodbye, America.